Hey guys, so let's jump into our conversational flow of our imaginary weather bot. So imagine that you're creating a flow for your first weather bot and you want to answer questions like what's the temperature or what's the weather, anything along those lines. So this is an example of bad design. We need to start with bad design because it's the most common design and that's where most people start. So imagine the user comes to your bot and then they ask what's the weather today. The bot, if it's the very first time they're using it, would need to have data in order to satisfy the goal. So when you're designing your bot, you want to consider all the different types of information that you need from the user so you can give them the best possible result. So you can solve their problem in the best possible way. So in this case, the bot asks, what city are you in, right? Next, the user says New York City. And then the bot says it's cold. So this is a good example of a bot answering the question properly, but not really giving the user the information that they're actually desiring. The user doesn't want to know if it's warm or cold, if it's sunny, or if it's cloudy. They actually want to know what the temperature is, what it feels like to go outside. They want more than just a one-word answer that gives them very vague information. So then the user follows up and says, do I need a raincoat? Now this is a good example of context. So typically, do I need a raincoat? We know that it has everything to do with weather, but for the bot, it'll look at this sentence and it'll say, I don't know if you need a raincoat. How am I supposed to know? So the bot responds, do you want to talk to dress right? Because it's not understanding that the context of do I need a raincoat pertains to weather. It's assuming that the context do I need a raincoat is, it assumes the context is associated with e-commerce and purchasing a raincoat. So how can we improve this? How can we fix this? So the first thing to know is that what the user says, what's the weather today? So that's just one possibility of what the user could say. The user could say, what's the temperature outside? They could say, is it sunny outside? Is it cold outside? Is it rainy? So you need to take this and then you need to add, other possibilities. Other inputs. And it's very easy to do if you're using something like Dialogflow. You just go in and you add all those different possible expressions, requests for weather. And then instead of thinking about this from the point of view of an intent or an intent flow, you can think of it from the point of view of a context flow. And that's really important because within this context flow, we can then later on include things like raincoat and umbrella, which is really, really important because if they're within this context, then we could say, hey, anytime someone is within the context of trying to find out what the weather is, then anytime they're within this group, within this flow, there's going to be a bunch of other questions and other pieces of information that they're going to potentially ask that's also related to weather. So your bot won't take them to some other piece, some other bot or some other part of the bot because the NLP pushes them out of this flow and into another flow. Next, the bot says, what city are you in? This is a great example of the bot requesting data. And data is very important and you want to collect it. Once you know this, you don't need to ask it a second time or a third time or so on. If the person has changed their location, something like Siri would know, but if they're on a web bot or if they're on your messenger bot or SMS, your SMS bot might not know that they're in New York City. Maybe they're in Chicago now. So your bot will need to be able to have different variable outputs for this response. So if it has data, it might have 3 or 4 different variable outputs. One would be, are you still in New York City? Did you want to know the weather for New York City today? Are you, or some other city, right? The other thing that you want to do is that since users are going to ask you questions, and they're going to give you variable questions. It's not going to be like the same exact. What you also want to do is you also want to make the answers variable. And we do this naturally in conversation. For example, if someone says hi, you say hi, or you say hello, or you say, hey, what's up? You don't always say the same thing. We don't talk like hi, hi, hi. You know, there's variability, and this makes the conversation interesting. And it also adds a element of personality, and it makes the conversation dynamic. So you definitely want to do that. You definitely want to make sure that the bot's answers are variable, even though they're giving you the same information. In the same way, a person's answers are variable, and they give you a sense of personality. So next, the user says NYC. Now, you have to make sure you, again, add a bunch of variations of this, like New York City, because that's a possible input. And another possible input is that they misspell things. So if someone misspells something, you need to account for that, and you need to understand that, you know, maybe they just misspelled it, and that what they really mean is, let's say they misspell weather, and it's the other weather or not, right? Your bot should be able to understand that you're still under the weather context. Next is the response. So it's cold is not a very good response. A better response would be like, it's cold and 46 degrees outside right now, and 55% chance of rain. And then if the user says, do I need a raincoat? This should be no different than if someone says, do I need an umbrella? Right? So you need to think about all these different types of situations in which your user would ask you for these sort of items. So, and then you want to make sure the way the bot responds to this is, again, you know, you want it to be within the context of weather. So stay within context. So let's do a quick experiment with Google. Hey Google, what's the temperature outside today? Okay, let's try it again because Google's not listening. Hey Google, what's the weather?
Currently in San Francisco, it's 64 degrees and mostly sunny. Today, it'll be mostly sunny with a forecasted high of 64 and a low of 55.
So that was a really good response. So what Google did there is it answered the question. Obviously it knows we're located in San Francisco, but it still added that piece of information of in San Francisco today. And the reason why that's important is that for some reason, let's say that I'm using the Google Assistant, or if it wasn't sure where I was, it's still giving me information about a specific city. So in this case, let's say you don't know where let's say the person's using your SMS bot asking what the temperature is. The bot could say, in New York City, it's XYZ. And now that's giving them the information that, hey, if they're out of the city, they could ask you what's the weather in Chicago and so on. Now let's do the umbrella / raincoat example. Hey Google, do I need a raincoat today?
Sorry, I don't understand.
So she doesn't understand if I need a raincoat. Hey Google, do I need an umbrella today?
No, it's not forecast to rain in San Francisco today. It'll be mostly sunny with a forecasted high of 64 and a low of 55.
So in this example, Google Home did a good job with umbrella, but it failed on raincoat. So you want to make sure that you have all these fleshed out in your design. And so let me draw a quick picture of what a good contextual flow will look like. And just as a heads up, it kind of looks like a flow chart. And the flow chart is going to have a number of possible inputs, variable outputs, possible inputs, variable outputs, and it all stays within one bubble, or you could say one bubble of context. And then the other thing that you need to consider is context switching. So, and that comes with the idea of slots. So, which is very important. So context switching would be like, for example, you're going to the coffee shop, you're buying a coffee, let's say you're buying an espresso, but then you're also thinking about getting the gift card, right? You're still purchasing something, but you're going back and forth between two very different types of purchases that have nothing to do with each other. So the Starbucks app, for example, or the Starbucks bot might have these in two different contexts or two different flow types. So as you're finishing or making a purchase of a cup of coffee, you might say, hey, I want to drink a latte, 2% milk, make it a venti. And then you might say, I want a $25 gift card, right? So you completely switched from one context to a very, very different context. And you're no longer within the same. It's no longer like umbrella and raincoat being related to weather, right? Now it's gift card and buying a coffee drink. They're very, very different things. So one of the things that your bot needs to be able to do is it needs to switch from that one context, from one flow, and jump into another flow, finish that flow. And the way to think about data is also think about data that's required to finish the flow, and this is what we can call slots. Amazon's Lex calls it slots. So as the person is giving you their order, they're going to be giving you information, and that information is going to fill in the slots. So if with the coffee example, I want to buy a venti latte, right? I've given it 2 dimensions. I've given it the size of the drink and the type of drink, but maybe wants to know if I want 2 shots or 3 shots. Maybe the bot also needs to know what type of milk I want. And is it for here or to go, right? So I might need 5 pieces of information. As I spoke, I gave it 3. Then I changed the topic, right? I changed the context. Now I'm talking about a $25 gift card. It adds that to my order automatically. Now the bot should go right back to the original context with the original flow and ask me, by the way, did you want 2% milk or some other type? And I would say, yes, I want 2%. And then the bot would say, is it for here or to go? And I would say it's to go. And then it combines the orders and gives me the total, and then I'm on my way. So that's the other thing that you need to consider. But first step is create your contextual flow. And next, let's go to part 3, where we discuss some of the tips and design conventions.